Ain't what you do.
It's the way hot you do it.
Ain't what you do.
It's the place that you do it.
That's what gets me so.
I'm Laurie Norton Moffat, Director and CEO of the Norman Rockwell Museum, and it is really a great pleasure to be presenting the life's work of Everett Raymond Kinstler, one of America's premier portrait artists. He's been likened to John Singer Sargent of his day and really has painted so many of our presidents and famous people and corporate CEOs and university presidents, as well as just people who wanted to have their portrait recorded for their home. And of course with him is his dear friend, the iconic musician and singer Tony Bennett, who is also an artist, and we'll be able to hear a little bit about that. And it's no accident that we chose to seat you in front of the portrait of Tony that Ray painted. And I'm just going to ask a couple of questions to get our conversation started, but then please ask your own questions.
Do you need this, or
it's going through here? It's actually picking me up.
Oh, good.
Yes. Good. So one question I had is, what has it been like for you, Ray, meeting so many famous people and deciding how to portray them, how to pose them, how to glean their personality and convey it in a painting?
How much time have we got?
How much time do you have? We have
a couple of days.
Start at 5 o'clock, the reception, is that it? We have about 20 minutes.
What was the question again? I think Tony particularly will appreciate this, that every day we feel blessed to get up and go to work and feel good, and every day is a challenge. And I think one of the things that I remember about Katharine Hepburn, when we were talking about a similar subject, and she said, you just get on and go and do it. Get along with it. Get on with it. And so every day is a challenge, and it's different. It's always unpredictable. Fair?
Right.
And that's the beauty of it, I think. That I think really how lucky I am, and dear Tony, that we're not retired at a certain age.
Right.
That you're blessed to have a talent that here and there people are interested in. And I mean this from my heart. Every day is another day, and what happened yesterday, that's yesterday. And he's a great example of it. He's just out there working. We're only 2 days apart in age. He's older, as you can tell, by 2 days.
I don't know, he's looking pretty jaunty up there on the wall here. I think you've immortalized him forever.
Maybe he may have immortalized me.
How did you both meet?
Well, we were in high school together at the age of 14, I guess. Right. Except I really don't remember him then. His name was Benedetto. And if you remember, we were in a trade school called the School of Industrial Art, where you were supposed to learn a trade, get out and make a living. And we both came from, I guess it's fair to say, lower middle class families. And Tony graduated, I didn't.
That's not true. I didn't either.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I didn't.
I
I had to get my mother to stop working, and I just had to get a job to stop her, and I left school, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know if it's unfortunate. I think in a way it's fair to say a couple of us, we've gotten honorary degrees, which is nice.
Oh, yeah.
And,
seems to be an artist tradition. Norman Rockwell left school as well.
That's true.
To go on to art school.
And so, knew that.
Yeah, and James Montgomery Flagg never went past 16. But I think fair to say we learned along the way, and still learning, without question, still learning. I didn't realize that about Mr. Rockwell, that he had not graduated. But he went to the Art Students League. I went to the Art Students League. Anyway, I had, of course, known who Tony was and would listen to his music, and sort of grew up with him. And then about 25 years ago, a cousin of mine who was in the entertainment business physically introduced us. But you see, when we were in high school, there were, I think, 3 grades, 10A, 10B, 10C, and each class had about 40 students. So that was 120 students. There's no way you'd know everybody in the class. But I used to hear about him.
But I had the most interesting introduction to him because through your cousin, relative, would you like to meet a great artist? He's my cousin. And yes, I would. I walk in, and he said, "You're Benedetto. You were born August 3rd, 1926. and you went to the High School of Industrial Art.
He knew
And I
you.
was shocked. I said, how do you know this? And then he explained that he went to the same school that we
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
What a coincidence.
It was a
that
coincidence.
Your lives wove back together.
But that's an idea of Everett's humor, beside his great artistry. He's quite humorous about the way he phrases his life's questions.
Those are my granddaughters, right there.
Hello,
Charlotte and
family.
Lucinda.
Well, Mr. Bennett, you're a painter as well.
Tony?
Mr. Bennett, you're a painter as well
he's
as a
been
musician.
my-
How did you come to
Right from the minute we
painting?
met, I just said, I'd like you to be my master and teach me how to paint.
Really?
And all those years, how many years is it now?
About 25.
25 years.
Excuse me, tomorrow will be 25 years.
Great.
No,
You're good with dates, aren't you, Ray?
no, as a matter of fact, there's one story that was very interesting for me. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had occasion to do a portrait sketch of Dave Brubeck.
Oh,
And he knew of my friendship with Tony. And of course, I think you described Take 5 as one of the classical jazz songs. Maybe
Right.
the classic?
absolutely.
Yeah. And so when I was with Dave, who's older than we are, as a matter of fact, and he's still out 300 nights a year, he lived in Connecticut, and he was asking me about Tony's painting. And I said, I've learned so much from Tony about painting through his music. And I said, one of the things I mentioned, I'm talking to Dave now, I said, I've told Tony that the American Impressionists basically worked off the middle. I said, I look at a palette as a keyboard. You've got high notes and low notes and in the middle. And I said, basically, Monet, Sargent, all the great painters were tonal painters and worked off the middle key. And I said, I've tried to mention to Tony if he likens it to music. And this man, I think, as an artist, has grown at the risk of embarrassing him. The voice is still incredible, but the phrasing, the experience, the feeling is so much more dimensional. Anyway, I was telling Dave, I said, I've tried to tell Tony, work off the middle when you paint, not bright colors or dark colors, but work off the middle. And Dave Brubeck looked at me and said, but that's how I play the piano.
Really?
And of course, he likened it to Art Tatum,
Right.
working off the middle, and what you do off the middle.
So it's a language.
And I think one of the great joys for me is to, if you're ever fortunate enough, which you probably won't be, is to ever watch Tony when he's recording. It's an experience that is, I remember he was doing a recording with Cy Coleman,
Yeah.
Colors of My Life,
My
was it?
Mind.
Colors of My Mind. And I think you did it 20 times. And each time you'd finish, could we try it again? And my favorite story, I've used this story, I don't mean to embarrass you, but it's a story that's meant so much to me. And I've used it as an example of how he thinks. He was recording an album, Here's to the Ladies. And I was in the sound booth with his son Danny, who manages him, and I guess a couple other people. And on the floor of the sound room, which was 100 feet, I think, it was like a tennis court. It was a 102-piece orchestra, I think, it was a South American conductor.
Oh, yeah, Colin Jelly
Was that his name?
from Buenos
Yeah.
Aires, yeah.
And Tony was in another booth, and he was singing, I don't know what the song was, let's say Sophisticated Lady. And he got through, and the orchestra leader had his baton, and he went like that. And the violinists all went like this to applaud him.
Oh.
And I looked at Danny, and I said, wow, that's fabulous. And we heard Tony's voice over the speaker. Could we try it again? And I remember looking at Danny, and I said, what's the matter with it? I don't know. So he came off, he did it again. I didn't hear the difference. You did. And I said to him, Tony, did you hear something in that recording you didn't like? And he said to me, and it had such meaning to me, he said, no, it's something I didn't hear. And I think that's the key to painting, that you've got that inner voice that people can tell you it's right, and if you don't feel it, if you don't have that genuine, how would you say, not confidence, but you've done the best you can.
Right.
And when you said it's something you didn't hear, I think of it so often when someone will say to me about the piano, about my painting, don't you like it? I said, no, it's something, as Tony said, I don't hear yet. I can't sign it because it doesn't feel right. And I think feel is not a bad word to use, no?
It's the best word in painting and music is without feeling, there's no art.
That's what it is to
It's
me.
all about feeling.
Yeah. And then the means to
Like that
communicate.
great painting there of Alfred Drake.
Thank
It's
you.
so beautiful. I mean, you look
Thank
at it
you.
and say, how could anybody paint that well?
I'm so glad you're here.
It's true.
So when you are sitting a subject down to paint with them, do you get to know them for a while at first? How do you decide how you're going to pose them?
That question
and-
really intrigues me a great deal. I think this painting of Tony is about the third painting I've done. That's not to include drawings. And I looked at this, I didn't even title his name on it, I just called it, when I had it in an exhibition, My Friend. Because this was the personal side of Tony. I think the other paintings I did were a little more the entertainer, or maybe.
Public.
But I'm not really sure, I really can't answer that. Often people will, you know, if you have a public figure, everybody knows who that figure is. So if I say to you Mary Smith, you say, who's Mary Smith? But if you say President Bush or President Clinton, people have an image, or Katharine Hepburn or John Wayne. They have their own image of the person. And I have had people, Tony, say to me, oh, I could tell you didn't like President Clinton. And I've had people say to me, oh, I could tell you really liked him. Well, the truth is, as I see myself interpreting, I enjoy doing what I do. I try to give everybody the very best I can, but it's not possible. You see, with a photograph, I think it's fair that people will accept it and say, well, it's a photograph. With the painting, everybody's got a different idea of what they look like, how the public views them. And so I think you do the best, again, to use Miss Hepburn's phrase, you do the best you can and you get on with it. I do think this, if I may. I have a great friend, Pat Oliphant, who is, I think, the premier political cartoonist. And his role is to put a needle in someone's rear end and make fun of them. That's his role as an editorial cartoonist. It is not my role in that painting or that pass judgment. I have to leave that up to you. I think more than anything that I would like to hear is to have someone say, it's a good painting. And I remembered at one point I saw a reproduction of a sergeant drawing of Ethel Barrymore. It was a reproduction, valueless. And it was up at Katharine Hepburn's apartment. And I, being a painter, looked at it and said, oh my God, it's Sargent. And Miss Hepburn waved her hand and said, oh, it doesn't look a thing like Ethel. And I thought, well, but that's how Sargent saw her. So I think as an artist, you have to have, I think, some integrity. And
But I think to explain
yeah.
that question is, you should tell them about, which you told me about, and about John Wayne and how it ended up being a successful painting, where you told them about, you were just saying we have to get the right feel, and then by accident he put his, hands on.
Thank you.
Explain that.
Well, I think one likes to remember compliments when they're paid to you, I think, and I'm human. And Miss Hepburn said to me one day, I was painting her, and she pointed her face, she said, you know, I like you. And I said, well, you know, I like you too, Miss Hepburn. I said, why? Because you do your homework. Well, when I was going to paint John Wayne, I knew what he looked like as well as any of you. And I noticed that he stood in movies, and if you watch his movies, you'll see this often, he stood with his hands on his hips. And I did my homework, I went through the movies, and you don't have this opportunity with everybody to study them. But I noticed this became, and that's an important word to me, characteristic of him. And when I was out in California with him, I didn't quite realize it was John Wayne. I can't explain this, but I was sitting next to him, I didn't quite understand it was John Wayne. And we were outside, and he was wearing, Tony, a brown polo shirt and suntans rolled up without socks and beach shoes. And it was all very amiable. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't realize then he was looking me over. He was not about to say, let's go ahead with this. And I said, by the way, sir, would you have a Western hat? And he didn't ask the young fellow from the museum, he directed him. Well, now, Rich, you go over there, and there's a hat there, just lift it off, bring it over here, and he put it on his head. And I looked at him, and suddenly, he'd be 70 years old, 72, and his face was really lined and craggy, and his teeth were cracked, and his eyes were kind of bloodshot. And he put the hat on, like this, and the shadow, Tony, went right across his face. And I looked at him, I said, oh my God, it's John Wayne. I said, I really said to him, I said, I've got a wee-wee. I said, I can't, I said, it's so exciting. And he stood with his hands on his hips. And I can't explain this except he had a manner of standing, if you watch his movies, with his hands on his hips, that was not heroic. It was almost sculptural, though. He was big from here up. And I noticed he did it. I was with him the whole morning, from breakfast all the way through lunch. And I noticed when he would stand there, he'd kind of lean over and he'd have his hand. So I said to him, I said, Mr. Wayne, I noticed, sir, I was looking for a hook, a characteristic, as you must with a song, something you can seize on that gives it the feeling and that is characteristic, that wasn't accidental. And I said, I notice, Mr. Wayne, you stand with your hands on your hips quite often. Is there any reason for that? And he said, this is almost verbatim. He said, well, you know, that comes from my football days. When we'd wait for a play, our pants had no pockets. So we stood with our hands on our hips. And that became, and watch his movies, you're going to find him leaning over just that way.
Time.
Yeah.
Does any member of our press have a question you'd like to address the artists?
Mr. Kinstler, I'm
Sir.
John Stewart from the Greenfield Reporter.
Yes, sir.
You made reference in one of your interviews to Robert Henry's.
Henry, sorry. No, I apologize, I don't mean to correct you, but I grew up with, it's Henri, and it is pronounced Henry.
Henry.
Is that who you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
You refer to that as one of the pivotal books. I think it's remarkable. I just wondered why, what it is in the book of value.
I'm so sorry, you said, did I value it?
Yes,
What
I realize
was-
you value it, but I wonder what it is in the book that is so pivotal, that's so endearing to you.
Well, now it's interesting because Tony is also a great fan of Robert Henry, and I think we agree the art spirit is. He could answer that just as well as I.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would just say that what the title of it itself gives it away. The art spirit. It's not how to do it. It doesn't tell you how to paint a nose or how to paint an eye, but it's, I believe, the foreword says something about to those who find signposts along the way. And I feel that that book, you can give it to an actor. In fact, I would recommend giving it to an actor or to a singer because it deals with feeling.
Well, the book explains,
Could I take one of these?
you know, one time I was visiting San Francisco, and I went to a friend's house, and his cousin, I just met his cousin, and he said, I have the greatest art, I have the greatest job in the world. I said, what is that? And he said, because I just met him. He said, I clean the streets of San Francisco. He said, I make this city clean, and I make sure that there's no dirt in the streets of San Francisco. And right there, I thought of the book.
Really?
Because in the book it said, anybody who does anything in a passionate way and dedicated to do things just right is an artist. It's not a matter of painting, it's not a matter of singing or dancing or anything else. It's a matter of whatever you do, if you do it very well, you are an artist. And that's what the book's about.
I would say so. It really, I'm glad you brought that up. The book has meant so much to me, and I know whenever I meet younger artists, through my teaching, if they ask what book, I said, don't the book How to Paint a Portrait, don't How to Paint a Landscape. That doesn't mean a thing. That's just technique, which is important. I'm not minimizing it. But in the beginning, as Tony mentioned, there's feeling, and then the importance of being able to communicate your feelings is very important.
Right.
And what Henry talks about is an attitude towards being an artist, how to speak. When I say how to speak, I would say he embraces feelings and how to enlarge those feelings, and what to keep in mind is, if I remember one line I used to use quite often, he said, if you're to a painter, if you're painting a smiling child, make your canvas smile. So it wasn't saying do this with the teeth or do that with the cheek. And this is what I look for in literature. It's what I look for in music. I would say if I had to pull down, and I would have to, I found that people like Mr. Henry and Hawthorne and all those painters all the way through had the same language. And that was the things that meant most to me are imagination, feeling, not necessarily in this order, imagination, feeling, and communication. And this man's an extraordinary example of taking a song and the feeling that comes through. Rarely have I heard him sing the same song twice the same way. And that's why I say to hear him at a recording session, I remember I was very lucky to, with your last album, was it John Mayer the second or the first one? The one from My Baby. It was the first or second duets.
Second duets, yeah.
And I think it must have been 3 hours you were doing it over, and John Mayer would say to him, "Can we do it again?" And Tony would say to him, "I'm here for you." And each time you did it with him, we were remarking about this in the booth, it was always a little different phrasing. Tony would come in a little differently, because he was feeling it all the way through.
That's a beautiful way to, I think, describe artistry at its best, and you both exemplify that
Well,
in
thank
your
you.
life's work.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, enjoy this beautiful exhibition
Thank
and
you.
surrounded, of course, by Norman Rockwell's paintings in the other
You've
galleries.
got it somewhere.
Thank you
during
for
the,
coming.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
For the photographers.
We can, if you want to go to this table, we can.